Imagine being convicted to life imprisonment for a murder you haven't committed, but then again, maybe you did. This is the case that makes us doubt justice and people in general. Believe me, you want to hear this until the end. You'll be surprised. I hope you will get caught in today's story, in today's true crime case. It is really controversial and I couldn't figure out to whom to believe until the end. I'm quite sure you will enjoy it if you're a real true crime junkie as I am. And I like old cases more than modern ones because in those times solving a case or a mystery was more challenging task than it's nowadays when we basically rely so much on technologies. Which is good, but it's more interesting to look into these old cases. And yeah, of course, as always on my channel, things are happening around Norway. So this is another case that took place in Norway. Hi everyone, if you are new here, this is Gita Lighthouse. This is my channel. We are discussing different topics related to Norway, and one of them is true crime, which is today's video's case. Let's start. Oslo, December the 7th, 1957. Police and firemen receive a call around 1:25 a.m. in the morning about a fire on an address Skippergatan 6B. 5 firemen arrive at the place of fire and, for their surprise, they also found a dead body in the basement of the building. It's a female. The body is stuck under the after-fire remains of sofa, floorboards, and a Christmas tree. Later they found out the identity of this girl. It was a 16-year-old girl named Rigmor Johnsen. She was lying here in this crime scene and her head was put on a coat, and you can see that there is a cut wound in the back of her head. It was also concluded that the girl didn't die from the fire. The girl died from strangulation, and they also saw some signs that the person who did this thing to her also tried to sexually assault her. Also, they found a bite mark on the left breast of the girl, and it was bleeding so heavily that the blood was simply soaking through her blouse. But the strange thing was that there was no blood where the head was lying, where, remember I said before, there was this cut in the back of her head. After examination of the body, it was concluded that the girl died around 1 hour before she was discovered, which could be around 1:30 a.m. in the morning, which is roughly the same time when the police and the firemen received the call that there is a fire. So she died roughly around the same time when the fire started. Around the same time, the police catches a man for a theft of a bike. This guy tries to run away, obviously showing that he might be guilty, but he didn't manage to escape the police, so he was caught. Skipping ahead of the story, later it was discovered that the bike was actually a bike that this man borrowed from his nephew. So to be honest, there wasn't any reason for him to escape. He could just stop and explain that he borrowed it and that it wasn't stolen, but still, it's kind of a weird thing. If you run away, people are kind of assuming that you are guilty of something. The man that they caught for the theft of the bike, his name was Fredrik Torgersen. He was 23 years old at that time. And later on, this person was considered the main suspect and also the guilty one of killing this girl named Rigmor I was describing before. This man came from a quite poor background, and he already had some criminal records related to theft and also to some violence. So in short, he wasn't a saint. For example, in 1952 he spent half of a year in prison for violence against the police. In 1954, he was charged with hitting a man and attempted burglary of a nursing home. In 1955, he was sentenced to prison for 5 years for an attempted rape of a woman. So now you know that he was actually a troublemaker. And now the spicy thing. Torgersen was actually released on probation from prison roughly around 2 months before this killing of this poor girl called Rigmor took place. So now that we have a rough understanding about who this man called Torgersen, Fredrik Torgersen, is, let's go back to the night when Rigmor was killed. So when the police caught him for stealing a bike, they brought him to the police station and started to talk to him. This is when they got quite suspicious and started to think that Torgersen might be involved in this case of Rigmor. So now I'm gonna tell you how everything happened from the perspective of prosecution. This is how the prosecution saw how the things were evolving on that night, and based on this, Torgersen was actually put in jail. And please bear with me, this is not it. This story is not it. There's more to it, so listen to it and stay with me until the end. And so, prosecution said that Torgersen followed Rigmor until her home, and around 11 p.m. he attacked her. It was assumed that then he dragged her into this house where the fire was caused. He smashed her head in the staircase, tried to strangle her and sexually assault her. As I mentioned before, the poor girl died from strangulation, and according to the prosecution, allegedly Torgersen might get scared or freaked out from the fact that the girl died, and this is when he decides to drag her down to the basement where actually the policemen and firemen afterwards found her. And so allegedly Torgersen got really freaked out, like he has now a dead body that he has to figure out how to hide. And this is when he decides that the best way how to hide this crime could be just set the house on fire together with the body. But the problem was that he didn't have anything to make fire off. Like he didn't have any matches, and this is allegedly how prosecution said. He decided to leave everything there, go hail a taxi, ride on this taxi around 3 kilometers until his home. Then when he gets home, he changes his clothes, takes some matches, borrows his nephew's bike, the legendary why he was caught before. So he borrows this bike, and on a bike he goes back to this crime scene just to set it on fire. And allegedly when he was finished like setting everything on fire, he got on his bike and tried to escape this crime place, and this is the moment when police caught him for stealing this bike. So this is the story from the perspective of prosecution. But you might ask, why the police, like while talking to Torgersen, why did they actually got suspicious that he might be involved in this murder? You see, the place where the police caught him for stealing the bike was around 150 meters away from the place where the murder took place. And I guess that was like the catalyst why the police actually started to consider that he might be related to this case. So based roughly on all of this story that I told you before, the way how prosecution saw this happening, on June 16, 1958, Fredrik Togersen was convicted for murder and sentenced for life imprisonment plus 10 years of probation. If you are an often guest on my channel, you most probably already know because I have mentioned it. Nowadays, there is no life imprisonment in Norway for any kind of crimes. The harshest imprisonment you can get is 21 years. So that was the time when there was still life imprisonment as a punishment for crimes. So it looks like the case is solved and we can put a full stop here, but you know me, like if there wasn't some kind of catch, I wouldn't be here discussing it. So here comes the catch. Part 2. The case did not get very high attention from the public, and Fredrik was sitting in prison for the murder until a man called Jens Ingvald Bjornebo came out with the claims that Torgersen is not guilty. The result of this writer's activity kind of created this Torgersen's action that collected around 5,000 signatures, from people who believe that he's not actually guilty, and people were asking for the case to be reopened and looked into again. Around the same time, also he released a book that was like specifically looking into prosecution, all the evidence and everything like around this murder. And there were like more people started to believe that Torgersen might actually not be guilty in this case. People, I guess, were like splitting. There were still those who believed that Torgersen did this, and there was this other part that strongly believed that there was something wrong with this case. He wasn't actually guilty of killing Rigmor. In 1974, after 16 years sitting in a prison, Torgersen came out, and I think it was on probation or something, and this is when actually he started to do whatever it takes just to clear his name. Oh, an important thing that I forgot to mention, Torgersen never plead guilty. Never. Like during his life, he never said that, yes, I did it. He was always claiming that he's innocent. And so, with all of this support from people who actually believe that he's not guilty, they started to file for the reopening of this case, like for a court to look into those evidences and the prosecution again. His calls for resumption of proceedings were denied by the Supreme Court of Norway in 1976. Then for a while, the book and all the activism was forgotten, until the 90s, when this case drew the attention of a media student, Camilla Juel Eide. She became interested in it. She, in cooperation with a lawyer, released a book claiming that all of this case has been a big miscarriage of justice. Again, with all of this attention, Torgersen asked to reopen the case in 1997, and in 2001 it was again rejected. In 2004, Torgersen again asked to reopen the case, this time to the Independent Criminal Cases Review Commission, and in 2006 it was denied again. And to be honest, at this point of researching this case, I became totally confused. Because imagine, now we are already in the 2000s, like he's still trying to reopen the case so that the court reconsiders his punishment and that he is guilty for killing Rigmor. Since 1957, when this murder took place, so many years had passed, and Torgersen still was trying to prove that he is innocent. He was filing to reopen this case again and again and again. I'm starting actually to feel that he might be innocent, because he's putting so much effort in actually proving it, and he's been like constantly denied for this right to reopen the case again. There were basically three main basic evidence that put Torgersen into prison, and I must say, my friends, they are quite shady. So let's start with the first, which was considered like the most important evidence that proved that Torgersen is guilty. And this evidence was dental prints. Remember at the beginning I told you that they found a bite mark on the left breast of Rigmor. So they tried to understand whether this bite mark corresponds to that of Torgersen's. Two experts were looking into this bite mark, comparing it with Torgersen's jawline, and they concluded that it's 100% match. But then there was this explanation that I couldn't actually figure out, and for me it sounded quite shady. I'm trying to translate it how I understood it. So these both experts were agreeing that this bite mark belongs to Torgersen. However, they couldn't agree on which teeth are the ones that we can see on this bite mark on her body, on the victim's body. So they couldn't tell which teeth are actually there in this bite mark, but they agreed that it belongs to Torgersen. It sounds so confusing, I couldn't follow, but the thing is that there was something they couldn't agree regarding teeth, but they were like 100% sure that it is Torgersen. I don't get it. And bear in mind, this bite mark was considered one of the main evidence that kind of proved Torgersen to be guilty of this murder. And moreover, Torgersen's teeth marks were taken for 2 times. Not 1 time, 2 times. So one was in 1958, shortly after this murder took place, and the second time was in 1960. First of all, why do you take it for 2 times? I don't get it. Like, isn't 1 time enough? That's quite weird. And afterwards, like the people who were trying to prove that Torgersen is not guilty, they tried to compare both of these teeth marks that were taken from him, and they concluded they look completely different. WTF. The difference between the 2 tooth marks were so obvious that these people decided to send these teeth marks to some really high-ranked experts in Great Britain to compare and say if these 2 actually belong to one person. They recognized that the dental alignment can change when you get older. That being said, the upper jaw seemed like a match, but the lower jaw did not match. They also said that the person's jaw cannot change so much between the period of 1958 and 1960. Again, WTF. This makes me think that the mark that was taken in 1960, the lower jaw, that didn't match, actually didn't belong to Torgersen. It was somebody else's, just to make him guilty. I don't know, and also I'm quite suspicious. Why did they take the other jaw mark in 1960 if there was already one in 1958 taken? And the one that was taken in 1960, that was the time when he was already imprisoned and everyone thought he is guilty. So maybe they just wanted to swap something so that they can tie this murder to him. It's one of the options. I'm not saying it is like that. I'm not accusing anyone, just thinking out loud, you know me. Now the second evidence that proved as the basis of putting Torgersen into jail. When they came to Torgersen's house to search it for some kind of proof that could kind of indicate that he might be related to murdering of Rigmor, they found that some clothing that had some spruce needles attached to it. Remember at the beginning I told you that there was a Christmas tree that was fallen on the body, so they thought that these spruce needles could be related to that Christmas tree. And so the prosecution said that the spruce that was in the crime scene, or the Christmas tree that was in the crime scene, was of a really rare type. And when they compared the needles that they found on the clothes of Torgersen, it was a complete match. And so they concluded that it's the same spruce, and Torgersen was there, so he's guilty. And talking more about these spruce needles, in 2006, when people who tried to again prove that Torgersen is not guilty involved some new experts just to look into these needles again. And these experts concluded that the spruce on the crime scene was actually really normal Christmas tree that was basically in almost every second household in Norway. And also these needles that were found on Torgersen's clothes were also coming from normal spruce tree. So basically there was nothing so special and that distinguished these spruce needles from the rest. If the Christmas tree was simple normal Christmas tree, and if the needles they found on the coat of Torgersen's was also from normal Christmas tree, this evidence doesn't make really so much sense. If this Christmas tree was the special, really rare, and the needles were also rare, it makes sense. But if it's the normal that you can find in every household in Norway, it doesn't make so much sense. It doesn't make so much impact, and it doesn't prove so much. And the third evidence that was also on the basis of saying yes, Torgersen is guilty, put him in the jail. This one got me really confused, really one. Let me just explain, and please let me know what you're thinking about it. So the thing is that when police arrived on the crime scene, they saw some feces there. I don't know, it was maybe animal or whatever. And when they were searching the house of Torgersen, they found that on his shoe there was also some pieces of feces, and also they found some pieces of feces on the matchbox that was in his pocket. And the police assumed that the feces they found on the shoe and on the matchbox in the pocket is the same that they saw on the crime scene. Assumed. They didn't even test it, as far as I know. I didn't find like any proof that they tested to compare, but most of the sources I was reading said that the police assumed, and it served as the basis of evidence. When they applied for reopening on 2006, they invited some new experts, and they concluded that prosecution was manipulating with this feces situation just to make a point. They did not have the actual evidence in hand, so this is why the claim was rejected, saying that these new experts are just speculating about this feces thing. So what do you think, guys, about this case, about Torgersen? Was he guilty or he was not? Because I am so confused, like honestly, this is the first case where I do not actually know what to think, you know, like at the beginning when I started to read, I was like, yes, they caught the killer, he's like a bad guy, he should serve life imprisonment, thank God there was life imprisonment at that time in Norway. But when I started to look into this case more and get into these details that these people who were kind of trying to prove Torgersen not guilty, I got lost. Because I'm actually starting to think that he might not be guilty. Maybe that's because, you know, like the case was solved in the 50s and there was not such a strong justice system created in Norway, and this is why they failed so much. Afterwards, when people started to ask questions, maybe they tried to hide this big hole they had in those times. Because now, I'm not like accusing anyone, I'm just thinking out loud and speaking, just for disclaimer. It looks like maybe it was very convenient to accuse Torgersen at that moment. So maybe they saw that, oh yeah, there's this guy, he's close to the crime scene, he was riding a bike, he's really close, so we can figure out how to tie him to this case. And while making the prosecution, they were putting and adding some more things just to really make him look like he's guilty. And also he had this criminal background, he was coming from a poor background, so maybe it was very convenient. I don't know, like, I'm not accusing anyone again, I'm just saying out so that you don't accuse me of anything, but it really looks like that. And what added more suspicion to this, like from my opinion, you know, like the prosecution said that when he understood that he had killed this poor girl, he decided to go home to take matches, which is so strange, really strange in my opinion. Or maybe, okay, if we consider, okay, he decided to go for the matches, but he was taking a taxi. And as I said, he wasn't a rich man. So I believe that if he was coming from a poor background, taking a taxi wasn't the thing that he could afford, actually. I don't know, like, that's quite suspicious. And also in some sources I read that people were claiming that allegedly, the willingness to put him in the jail was so intense that the prosecution and the police actually took away some of the evidence that 100% proved that Torgersen is not guilty. So they took all of the stuff away and tried to fabricate all the stuff they had so that Torgersen looked guilty. Again, allegedly, I read somewhere people are saying it's like, I do not have any proof, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not anything. So this is a disclaimer, I'm just saying what I have read and seen. For all of his life, Torgersen claimed innocent. The last time when somebody requested to look into the case again was in 2017, declined again. Torgersen died in June 18, 2015. And as I said, the last request was in 2017 after his death. So people are still fighting for the justice. This is food for thought, guys, like for real. I'm really looking forward to read your comments, your thoughts about this case. And the thing that really creeps me out is that if Torgersen is not guilty, for the whole of his life, he had to carry this burden of killer on his shoulders, although he wasn't. If he wasn't guilty, then there was a man who actually escaped his punishment and who was just sitting like this and looking at all of this happening with this poor guy who wasn't guilty. And we still don't know who is this guy who actually did this terrible thing to this girl. So, creeps me out for sure. Okay guys, thank you for watching today's episode. I was really caught in this case. I found it really interesting. I hope you too. Let me know in the comment section again what you are thinking about this case. Do you think Torgersen was guilty? Have you heard about this case before? And yeah, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share this story with somebody who might also be very interested to hear it, because the more you share, the more people maybe will come and subscribe to my channel. I really need that. To be honest, the only thing that is missing for me to get monetized is just the number of subscribers. So if you have some friends who might like my channel, do suggest them to come here. I will be very happy to welcome them. So that being said, I hope you will stay safe. Take care about yourselves. Do not risk going to the places where you do not feel safe. And be careful. You never know when there's danger behind your back. See you next time.